I have a quick question.
Okay. Who's got a quick question? Emma?
For the midterm, I know, I think I asked you last time. You said we have a whole week, so I saw it starts March 3rd. And is it going to be timed, or we have the whole week to finish?
You've got the whole week. All you got to do is from the time it gets available until you're having to turn it in is probably 1 hour less than a full week, and you have as much time as you want to. The trick is don't wait till the last moment. I'm going to start early. Let's see. So I got Kayla here, and I've got Teresa here, and I've got Mandy up there. All right. Deshawn is there. We talked to her. Teresa, how are you? Good. All right. Guess we're in the sign language now. And how is Kayla? Oh, yeah. And Mandy?
I'm good.
Good. There's Aisha. How are you?
Good, and you?
Super deluxe. All right, one more thing. I got Emma. Ashura, Emma. Aisha. Aiden. Teresa. Mandy. Let's see, Kayla's here. There. Missed anybody? You have an open so. Okay. So who had a rotten weekend so we can have something to talk about? Oh, bummer. Aiden had a rotten weekend. Why'd you have a rotten weekend?
I'm just feeling I had a wonderful weekend.
Okay, great. I guess that gave us something to talk about. Let's see. What was the wonderful part of the weekend? I guess it was not being not going to work for some of us. Didn't get any new snow. That was a good thing.
Yeah, we just got like frigid rain. The icicles pulled down our gutters.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, I'm kind of waiting for that to happen at my house. I needed new gutters anyway, but it's just chock full of ice. So
If you can, knock them down first, because like a cumulative thing, you know.
yeah. Well, I've been knocking them down, but unfortunately, I got a big old lump right where the gutter is. There's a big lump up above the edge. So ice dams are all over the place.
Yeah, and they're causing, like our living room caused a leak because they're damming into any little crack they can find.
Yep. I'm kind of sitting here waiting for that to happen so I can get yelled at. But
Because it's all your fault.
exactly.
I have all trouble for the gutter coming out of the water from the porch
Yeah.
and the yard because the gutter stopped.
Yeah. That's
It's black, right?
yeah. There's
You have
one.
no eye.
I look around and I go, okay, just about everybody's house has them. So I'm just like, I'm not feeling too terribly bad, but I'd like to see it good. What we need is a couple good 70-degree days. Wow.
Wait until May.
Yeah, well, I don't want to wait till May. I just think it'd be good to do it tomorrow. But, all right, let's see. I got Kay Dukes came in, and I also had Ariel came in, so we're good there. And I think the only person I am missing is Michaela. She's not here yet. Right? Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. First thing I wanted to talk about was the projects. I graded the portfolios and I returned them to you. A couple of things to note. As I was telling Aiden earlier, I do still have motor skills, but when you look at the way it comes out, I do it on a tablet. And so writing on glass is a little bit different than paper, and the size might be goofy. So I'm not trying to be unprofessional, but when I write on those tablets, they don't always work really as well as I'd like. With that said, people did a good job on these. The thing, if you notice that you've missed some points, there's typically one major thing that people do where they miss points, and the other one is that doesn't happen very often, but happened a couple of times this time. The first of those is if you go over to the instruction sheet, it tells you very specifically the things that I want to see here. So if I say I want to see the time and the aims, and I want to see the materials and the preparation procedure, I'm going to be looking for those headings in there. And so most of it, this time around, people were pretty good about that. Oh, and assessment's another good one. People were pretty good on that. A few places missed some things. But if you've got the materials, you've got the procedure, remember what I had mentioned early on. These should be written in such a way that even a substitute can be able to pick this up and run with it. And so that means that you've got to have some preparation instruction. I saw a few people leave those off. And you've also got to put in the worksheets. You've got to give me some idea or some outline of the new content that you're teaching. If you've got worksheets, PowerPoints, word lists, texts, and so forth, you should have those available to me so that I can see them. And for the most part, those were there, but there were a few people who left some things off. One other area, and that's the key area where people miss things, was having left some things off. So as you get ready to do number 2, the portfolio number 2, make sure you reread those instructions and look for the things that it says I'm looking for, because I will be looking for them. And you can tell I'm gonna, because if you look at the scoring criteria sheet, you see where I've got numbers attached to all of those various things. So that's one. Another one, and I only saw this happen 2 times, and it was interesting. It was on the same topic, but don't always trust what you find on the internet. The area where I saw this happen twice was on pronouns. And there are a lot of places online that will tell you the word my is a pronoun, or the your is a pronoun. They'll call them possessive pronouns, but they're not. They are determiners. And interestingly, both of the people who wrote up the pronoun exercise told me that a pronoun replaces a noun or a noun phrase, but they then went in and said my and your and our is a pronoun, when in fact, that's not replacing anything. So even though they knew what the rules were, I assume they got some information off the internet and used it, so it gets in the way. So watch out for that. And it's a very common error. Everybody wants to go out and get something that we pull together easily, only to find out that it's kind of flawed. Now, the next thing about the scores is if you go through the scores, you think that I have graded unfairly, I want you to come back to me and let me know why that is and where it is. Because I don't want you sitting around feeling like, oh man, you graded me and it's right here and I might have just missed it. I won't do it in a class environment like this, but you can come to my office hours or write to me and we'll schedule a time to talk. So I don't want anybody sitting around, oh, you ripped me off for these points. If you feel that way, I want to be able to talk to you, walk through it with you, and see if that is in fact true, which sometimes it is. And in other cases, make sure that you understand why you lost points there. But don't hesitate to call me on it if you wish to, okay? But just do it via email or a text or something for office hours. All right. So with that in mind, we've kind of gotten those back. They're all sitting out in D2L. So if you haven't seen them already, you can go out there and see my comments and the score sheet. I attached 2 files. But I was wondering, did anybody have any particular exercises that they wrote up that they thought were particularly good or particularly interesting? Because that way you can share some of the stuff with the other people in the class. Anybody come up with one that they thought was particularly good? Oh, come on. Come on. Don't be bashful. Let's see. Am I going to have to call on somebody? That would really be a bummer. That does. Well, one of the things I noticed, most people just jumped in there and did nouns. Nouns, 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 nouns. Some people spread them out. But let's see. Aiden, you got a good one?
Yeah, I didn't know we had the luxury to do all that, so I might have.
Well, you had the option, but it's better to do different things, actually. It gives you more practice.
Okay, one that I had that I thought was a pretty good lesson was about comparative adjectives.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to think of how to describe this verbally. Can you share it? Can I share it?
Yeah, I can open it up so you can share it. Let's see here. There you go. You should be able to share.
Okay. actually. Okay. So I did one of my lessons about comparative adjectives. Wait, can you see it right? Is that cool?
Oh yeah, it looks great.
Yeah, you gave me this look like it's okay. So these are the headings I did. I guess a lot of people didn't know that. Just ripped it from the grade sheet, and the procedure was to have two things that are different. Like, you know, two houses. One's way nicer than the other. One's like kind of not so nice. And then, so this is to teach words like nicer, newer, older, taller, bigger, whatever. And then, you know, this would kind of rely on students knowing the base words like big, nice, new, and then you kind of teach them in comparison. You ask which one is nicer, and then kind of by proxy, they're gonna start to get those words in their vocabulary. And then later on, I just pulled these from the internet, you know, whatever.
Rosa Parks was a nobody.
Again here, and then some of them have more syllables. Some there's like different little rules.
Yep.
So, you know, here's the
Oh,
key there.
what you doing, Peppy?
And my handwriting is usually a little better than this.
So the dinosaur those guys.
Energetic. Yeah.
Yeah, no, yeah, well, energetic, you know, kind of Easter imagination.
All right.
All right, well, you're
For
good.
now.
Who else got one? Anybody else have another one that they thought was good? I like the picture. And you did get to the rules, so you did talk about the syllables and when it becomes more and most as opposed to RPR. It's your moment to shine.
A generality, if I'm able, like many of the lessons online did not really introduce anything new. I found it was actually to like explain like,
No, you done with class?
so if maybe for the next one if you have any resources, I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but I think you probably are developing enough of the background to get to it. Because you don't have any idea of the comparatives. I'm not looking for necessarily an absolute word by word what it is you're doing. Just an outline of what it is that you're going to do. Some people put those in slides. Other people just put them in bullets. Sometimes they got left off. So you're supposed to show the content, and you're going to be teachers, so you're going to look at that topic and say, well, what can I say about it? And again, I'm looking more for an outline than I am for a long treatise on exactly what you're going to do. Here's a thought, though. Something for you to remember is substitutes can come in and be absolutely cold on grammar and parts of speech. They may not have dealt with it 20 years.
Woman.
Suddenly you're telling them, okay, well, do this.
The woman.
If you don't give them an outline, help them remember about it, then they're going to not be able to pull the exercise off. And you may still be able to, but even for you, you get 5 years down the road and you're going to be sitting there thinking, well, what was it about prepositions of little things and large things? Having something out there that actually talks about it and a few notes will catch them up. This is going to be particularly important next time because you're going to be talking about verbs. And some of you are going to choose different verb tenses or different verb aspects. Some things we're going to talk about this afternoon. But if you go in there and you say, okay, show them how to make past perfect verbs.
Who are you?
You may remember it a couple of years from now, but they are very likely not to remember what a past perfect verb looks like or why they would use a past perfect verb instead of a past tense verb. So it's important for you to go in there and put in a little bit of that information and catch them back up to speed. And it's not always just catching them back up to speed. It may be something that's helpful for you as well. So you're going to be teachers, so I don't want you thinking that your students are going to come into your classroom knowing everything that they need to know and all they have to do is review it. That's not the case. You're going to have to be able to bring them new information and build that information. So it takes a little bit of thought about how you can explain it. Okay? So shot that down, didn't I? Huh. Okay. Anybody else? Anybody else? See hands move, but you're scratching heads. All right, so anyway, give those a good solid look. I want everybody to get 10 on the next one. It's not that difficult. Follow the steps, make sure that what you told me is grammatically correct. Put all the pieces in there, and it's like magic. It comes out.
You just used it.
Okay?
Well, can you stop?
And again, if you don't like what the grade was, and you think it was unfair, please let me know. All right, with that in mind, let's go over to the homework. And we're going to talk about these. I want you to pay particular attention to the idea in these P2 and P3. The reason for that is oftentimes we have this tendency to think if we're talking about the present, I'm going to use the present tense. In fact, that's only true part of the time. Because the present tense is not always talking about the present. It may be talking about something habitual that you do every day, but you're not doing it right now. So if I were to say, I eat hamburgers, that does not mean I am eating a hamburger right now. And so what we need to do is be able to go in there and recognize that when you've got people talking about the present tense, there are lots of different tenses and aspects that they can use to actually do that. So looking at page 98, for instance, the simple present is one way of talking about the present for something that's habitual or that you repeat all the time, or, and it doesn't really fit here, if you're writing in your book, you might say state of being verbs. The state of being verbs in the present tense typically mean right now. But the present progressive is one that we use a lot. I am eating hamburgers. That's talking about doing it pretty much right this very minute. The present progressive. The present perfect. I have eaten in that hotel, in that restaurant many times. Partly, it's talking about what happened in the past, but it's also perhaps impacting what I'm doing right now. I've eaten here several times. Is a good indication, perhaps, that I am actually eating right now, and it started in the past and it continues till now. And then there's also the present perfect progressive. Have been eating. Once again, I have been eating for 5 minutes, and I'm very possibly still eating right now. So recognize the present tense is not enough to call it talking about the present. There are different ways to talk about the present. And these four are just are the four that you probably should pay attention to. Okay? With that, any question on page 98? I'm going to go through this a little faster today, so hopefully if you've got any questions, you'll call them out quick.
Is this the sort of thing that you have memorized, or do you prefer to need to know?
I've worked with it enough now that I can think my way through it. I don't always have it right at the tip of my tongue. I'm going to show you, and one of the exercises for Wednesday will be, how do you tell what these different tense aspect combinations are made up of? And
Quiet.
as far as
You gotta answer that thing.
with the various meanings
Oh
on
my
a
God.
particular website that is particularly good for that, and I will do that in the PowerPoint also. So I kind of use them enough to where I could easily pull them apart and pick them, come back together. But I oftentimes have to, okay, there's a have, there's a past participle, and there's an ing verb. That's the past perfect progressive.
Put an answer in this, huh?
Anybody 99, page 99. What? Or 101.
I had a question on page 100.
Okay.
For letter B, I didn't understand why it was 3. Because it says
Okay.
vote by, like I just didn't get that part.
Okay. So in the election today, most of the city's residents voting by computer. There's something missing there. And the thing that is missing is a conjugated verb is, I should say conjugation of be. So it really should be in the election today, most of the city's residents are voting by computer. And that's why it's great. Just don't forget to use speed. When you're talking about, in this case, the present progression, it requires some form of speed to be there. So voting by itself is not a verb with intent. Okay?
But because it could also say most of the cities vote by computer.
Aim for actions that happen every day or all the time. I suppose that could be,
Can you
although
give me some
I don't
tissue? I have blow my nose.
the election today doesn't really kind of take us back to something that happens every day or all the time. Certainly, we could have something in there.
Thank you.
If we left it off, most of the city's residents vote by computer, we could do that, and that would be maybe a more general time frame. But with today, it probably doesn't
I'm
work very
tired too. Oh my God.
well. Others? Okay, how about C? How about C? About 30% of U.S. households are owning a car now.
So cannot be just about.
Yes, it is going to be just home. So you may remember I wrote you something the other day about concerning, right? My bad, shameful self. Oh, I was supposed to hang my head in shame today because I said concerning was a verb, and in fact, it wasn't working as a verb. The same basic thing is happening here. We aren't owning something. We own it. And
You're not
something is
helping.
concerning me.
Do you want me to
Concerning
mute
it
it?
concerns something. So yes, I marked down two. Don't use ing for things that happen every day or all the time. That's one possibility. But so is five. Don't use the progressive if the verb does not show action. So in that particular case, I think 2 and 5 are both very good answers. Even though the book said 2, I think 5 is a better answer.
So the D is the verb is R or were.
Are or were, yeah.
Both.
Yeah, if you want to talk about today they are voting or today they were voting, depending on what you meant, you could use either one. If you were talking about at 9 o'clock at night after the polls closed, then you would say most of the people were voting by machine computer. And if you're talking about while it's still open, it's probably going to need are. Page 101. 102. 103.
I saw it earlier.
I want you to pay some quick attention to one thing on page 103, and that is 3.2.16. We're talking about dictating verbs in just a little bit. But make sure that you got to pay attention to that, because this is likely to be a question on the test that talks about negating verbs, and you're going to need to be able to tell me how that's done in general. Okay, so don't miss 3.2.16. Give that a quick circle if you want. 104. 105. 106.
Go back alarm. Wow.
Once again, we see that the result is that almost everyone is owning a cell phone. Rachel brought that one up. It really should be almost everyone owns a cell phone. Cool.
Page
All right. I'm sorry?
Page 104, C and F.
On page what? 104? D and F?
C and F are 3.218.
Okay. Professional tennis players today are not take many vacation days. Did I read that? Professional tennis players today are not take many vacation days. So what did you put down as the answer?
Do not take.
Okay, so do not take. That is true. But I also think it's changing the meaning of the sentence. Do not take would be okay, but you can also go in here and say, don't use, and this is answer number 2, don't use am not, is not, or are not with the base form of the verb. Then it's going to require an ing. I could see where your answer would work if you put in a do not take. As they are looking at the question here, basically probably they're paying attention to are not taking. And you said F, many people not speak English well. And so what did you do?
I think a do not.
Right, number 1, right? Many people do not speak English well. They need English classes immediately. That's correct. Sorry? Oh, do not use don't to negate verbs in present perfect. So let's see. Many people don't speak English. Well, number 1, the big problem here is this is not the present
No,
perfect,
what the heck?
right? And so
heck,
if it's not the present perfect, form would be the answer. If you went in there and you used number 1, which was just to remember do not, then you'd be fine. Okay, because it's the simple present. All right, okay, I'm jumping over to verb for T3. Once again, the same thing happens here. Look at all the different ways that we talk about the past. It's right there on page 108. I'm going to point it out to you in your textbook because it's an extremely important topic. We do have the simple past, right, where we go out there and we typically would put a D on the, or D or an ED on the end of a verb and call it the past tense. That's true, but there are a lot of other ways that we talk about the past tense every day. For instance, I bet you have probably said sometime today, I used to do something. Used to, it's one way we mark something that was done in the past. Also, we sometimes use it with the word would. When I was a kid, I would ride my bike to school every day. That's talking about something that was done in the past. So used to and would are there, but so are the other tenses. And so each one of these tenses has a slightly different meaning. And this is a place where when I have to come up with the answers, I have a website I'm going to give you that I would go to remember what they are. There's probably 7 different ways at least of using the present perfect. And it means many different things, quite complicated when you're an English language learner to try to pull all this apart. But pay close attention to the fact there are many ways to talk about the past. Not the least strange is when we talk about the present. How about if you're walking down the street with your friend, and you say, I was walking down the street with this guy, and suddenly yesterday, and he says, look out. Well, says is in the present tense. Why would you say says? And he says, look out, as opposed to he said, look out. Why do you think you do that? Yes, ma'am. Charlotte, why would we do that? Okay, I saw your hand. I thought you were waving me down. Think about it. Kayla, what do you think? Kayla, what would we be walking down the street and say, yesterday I was walking down the street and this guy said, watch out. Do you think is it right or is it wrong? Well, one could say it's wrong because it doesn't match the prescribed rules. But on the other hand, you probably say, yes, because I meant something very specific by it. I think when people do this, notice they're trying to pull you into the moment and get you to help experience the moment. And so instead of saying, and he said, watch out, you kind of drag them into the story and go, and he says, watch out. We do it all the time, right, Kayla? Kayla, you do it right? Yes. Okay, good. Just want to make sure. Now, recognize that we've got all of these ways of talking about the past. You're going to be doing one more of these keys for Wednesday, which is talking about the future. And once again, you're going to see there are many ways to talk about the future. But any questions here on pages 108 or 109? $110 or 111?
Page 106, number 8.
106?
Yes.
To open a new account, this bank do not require a letter of recommendation. So for simple present tense, remember to use does with he, she, and it. So the answer there is 1. Why did I mark number 2? For simple present, do not put S on verbs in questions and negatives. In questions and negatives. So to open a new account, this bank does not require a letter of recommendation. I should have 2 mentioned there. So the answer would be 1.
What is 2? I just think those explanation will be too hard.
Right, but in number 2, use only the base for he, she, and it. Yes, in a question, but this isn't a question. Right? This is just kind of a statement, and that's why it's the answer is 1.
Oh, okay.
I'm jumping to 110 and 111. I've been here.
I have a question for 111.
Okay.
For 3.311. I just want to know like a good explanation for that in case.
Okay, so English learners who see a list of past participle forms of irregular verbs may feel overwhelmed. What can a teacher tell these learners to lessen the apparent learning burden? There are a lot of irregular past participles. And so that's a true statement. And if you look at a long list, you're going to go, whoa, that's a lot. But most past participles are actually going to be the same as the simple past tense of the verb. So that's the first thing that makes it a little bit easier. So there's a relatively small number of irregulars to memorize. And let's see. That's the key for me. It's just there aren't that many. Unfortunately, there aren't enough where you have to memorize them because there's no rule really that talks clearly. This is how you make past participles. The majority just look like the past tense verb. The ones that aren't, you just have to learn. And some of those that aren't are just used all the time, like seen and eat and stolen. So they'll run into them a lot, but unfortunately, it's kind of a memorization task. Okay? 112, 113, 114 or 15, 116 or 117. 118 and 19, 120 and 121. So we don't have any. If you have some we spend here that you missed, be sure to write me. I'm sorry?
120.
120.
B and D. C, D, F.
B, D, and F?
Uh-huh.
All right, B. Did life in Latvia used to be very different before it joined the European Union? Now, here's the trick. You see the word did? Did is in the past tense, right?
What are you doing?
This is in letter B.
You go back to class at 2, right?
So used to, we don't make them both in the past tense. It's going to only be in the present. So this is a very confusing one, and I think a lot of Native American speakers run into this problem. Did life in Latvia use? Given the did, we only have one thing in the past. That's why we don't put a D on that one. So the answer would be 6.
What's the nine?
6 is right.
Why you bad? I don't
You would take
want
the used to and you change it to use. D off of use. Yeah, this is one most of us call like this from time to time.
Yes, I had big.
We specifically messed it up when it should use to, because it was in the past when we say used to. Okay, you said D. When you arrived at the hospital, were you see the doctor right away? Well, were you see, that would have to probably only work with were you seeing. What we really need here in this case is the word did. Do not use begin simple past tense verb question. It should did see. And do not use did in question form in the past perfect. So we're looking at number 5. I am glad your trip to Italy last month was such a success. That part's correct. Did you have travel? Well, once again, we've got that word did in there. And we should really only have one verb in the past tense. And here we have did and had. And so it should just be, did you travel? There we go. But had traveled should not be in the past tense when did is already there.
Have you traveled?
Yes, you could do that. Have you traveled there before? Then have is in the present tense and traveled is a past participle, but you don't have 2 past tense verbs. So have you traveled would be fine. But it wasn't one of the options. So in this one, in this particular case, it's fine. Don't use did with past perfect tense. Okay. Now let's jump in here. I want to cover a couple of things, and before we get too far down the road, and so I am going to go out here and you stop sharing. Turn off sharing, Aiden, when you got done. Yes. Okay, great. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to share. Fun facts about verbs. I'm not sure that there are any fun facts about verbs. Some of you probably remember David Letterman, and he used to always have a segment of his show called Fun Facts, usually things that were lies. However, we will be talking about having fun with these verbs. And this is kind of a lot of miscellaneous information about verbs, things that we need to remember, because verbs are very flexible and they're really quite complicated in English. So let us travel along here. First off, and then this one's for Rachel. Rachel, when we were talking about not having 2 tense verbs, we have to have 1 tense verb in every sentence, but we can't have 2. So what I oftentimes talk about is, I talk about a tense verb or a completed verb. And what that means is we have to have a verb that clearly shows tense in every sentence. So looking at some of these, if I use 2 infinitives like to go or something like that, it is not a tense verb. I to sleep tonight doesn't sound right. And to sleep is not a tense verb. I sleep tonight, that's fine. But I to sleep is not a tense verb. The same thing happens with past participles. I just eat is not okay. I seen him yesterday. Well, even though you'll hear a lot of people say, I seen him yesterday, it's really an incorrect verb form. It should be, I saw him yesterday. But I think if you go down south, you'll hear a lot of people say, I seen him yesterday. Right? And so it is a bit of a problem. But past participles are not tense verbs. Eaten
Not now.
cannot stand by itself. Seen cannot stand by itself because it's not a tense verb. And similarly, present participles,
Ah,
the things that end in ing, are not tense verbs in themselves. Okay? So he going home or I going home is not okay because going does not have a tense. Recognize something here though. This is where it's going to sound funny. But the fact that I call something a past participle or a present participle does not mean it is in the past tense or the present tense. Participles have to be used with another helping verb. So I have just described. I had seen him yesterday. Great. He is going home. But you've got to remember.
why you shouting?
in
What the
these two
heck?
cases here, participles are going to have a helping verb of some form.
You told him to give you Jeremy's.
Okay. There are two participles, one in the past and one in the present. They are used.
Yes, you deserve that kiss.
Regular verbs or a past tense or
I
a
thought you
present
liked
tense.
that.
They have to
Well, you asked
have
him to kiss you then.
an auxiliary or a helping
You
verb
told him to kiss you on the lip.
being the verb of a
On
sentence.
the lip. On the lip.
And
On the lip.
it's very misleading to call them as participles.
Let him kiss your whole mouth. Oh, no. Kiss him, kiss him, kiss him.
Verb forms, and like we talked about case verbs, we talked about past tense,
Give me
present
you.
tense, and
Hey,
we've also talked about infinitives and participles.
no, you do it. I don't want to. Go away. I'm not trapped. I don't need
In these three here, why is it that they're not completed verbs? Well, they don't have tense with them. The thing that's going to give them tense is going to be the auxiliary verbs in the participle case, the helping verbs. That's where the tense will be. And infinitives, we just can't use the word to call out a verb tense. Now, when I say that sentences have to have a tensed verb, you must have a tensed verb. One of the verbs in a sentence has to be tensed. So we've talked about I to sleep tonight. No, that's no good. I need a tensed verb. I want to sleep tonight is great. Because I want is a present tense verb. In the case of past participles, I've mentioned that we have to have helping verbs or auxiliary verbs. I just eaten would be perfectly fine
give
if I
me
said
more
I have
tissue?
just eaten. Or I had seen him yesterday
Bathroom.
before not. I
I want
have
that
just
direction.
eaten. This is the present tense of the verb have and everything is fine. Had, past tense of the verb have. Everything is fine. And then when we get into the present participles, we're going to be using some form of to be. He going home is not okay. It does not make a full sentence because there's no tense. The way we should say it would be he is going home, or he was going home, or even he will be going home. But it's the be, the auxiliary verb, that is actually carrying the tense.
Was this on the little white tube or what?
Now, for Rachel, who called this out for us before, two tensed verbs don't go together. I cannot say he went home, right? I can't say he is go home. He is goes home. That would be two tensed verbs together. And while you've probably never really thought much about it, those don't work because you have to have a tensed verb in a sentence or a clause, but you can't have two of them going together that way. You might have an auxiliary verb and a main verb in the past participle. But remember that past participle is not tensed. So I had saw him is no good. I want sleep. No, that's no good. Unless you're sleep now. If you're sleep is a verb, this is a verb. And he's go home, that doesn't work either. One tensed verb in a clause. There might be a whole bunch of verbs together in that clause, but only one of them is going to be tensed. Another thing that I want to make sure we cover is looking at patterns. You can go back to this stuff and you will find patterns if you really look for them. Okay? One pattern is have as an auxiliary usually has a past participle with it. Another one is as a auxiliary verb usually has an ing present participle going with it. But there are other patterns, and the reason that patterns are so important is because if you can teach your students a pattern and get them to reliably use that pattern correctly, you can teach them one thing that they can use 1,000 times. And that's a heck of a lot easier than teaching them 1,000 discrete things. I could say, I'm going to teach you, I slept last night, I ate last night, or I am not going, I will not go, I have not gone. There is a pattern here. And so you look for those patterns and help them see the pattern because the whole of language is wrapped around this system of patterns. A few exceptions, yes, but far fewer exceptions than we usually think. So what is the rule for using not? Given that you're thinking about a pattern, and you look at this pattern, I am not human, I have not been to Spain, I have not been eating properly lately, I did not do that, I would not have gotten there when you arrived, I should not go to the wedding, he should not have been eating shellfish, and he will not be feeling well now. There's an obvious pattern here, but it's time to start looking for it. Because if you can find the pattern, you can pass it on to your students, and suddenly they have 1,000 answers, not 1,000 discrete. What's the pattern? What is the simple rule for using not to negate a sentence? Anybody?
Rachel.
Rachel, okay, Rachel.
Oh, sorry. Based on what you just said about the tense verb, so I'm going to see the negation just right after the tense verb.
Well, that's almost true. You're very close to the right answer. But if I look down here to say he should, right? Look down at he should not have been eating. The tensed verb in there is have, and not is going in front of it.
I'm not sure.
Right? So it's not coming right after the tense verb, but you're almost there. Where is it? It's always after it's always after the. It's always after the. Hey, you gonna answer it?
Well, I was thinking about it, but it's an object? Is that what that is?
No.
Not even close, right?
No, can't say that one. Teresa, I'm working my way up the list. Teresa, where does the not go?
Um,
Well, close, that's another closed statement, but not quite there. Because I am not human, is not an auxiliary. It's a main verb. Somebody want to guess? Fish Dara, you want to guess? Ariel, you want to guess? Deshara, you ready?
no, I'm not ready. I'm trying.
All right, very good. Let's see. Kate Dukes hasn't said a word all day.
After the form of
Well, that's true in that one sentence, but these other ones don't all have to be. So it's even a more general. You got an idea for me? Because some of them have past participles, present participles. That can't be it. Let's see. Morgan, Aisha. No, huh? It's really easy. You're going to go punch yourself in the head when I tell you how easy this is. Kayla, you want to save yourself a punch? Kayla, it's almost like Michaela, only Kayla. Andy.
Please go in the room. I'm in my house. No!
And it doesn't matter whether that's a main verb, an auxiliary verb, or a modal verb. You look at this. Am is a verb. Have, did. Will is a modal verb. Should's a modal. Should's a modal. Will's a modal. Where does the not go? When you're making a simple statement, it always goes after the first verb. Am I right?
No.
Mandy, am I right?
Wow.
Am I lying to you?
Not because I'm not doing work, because I'm not doing camera.
Mandy,
Yes, that makes so much sense.
am I right? Taylor, am I right?
Yes.
Come on. All right. Just a note. Look at the patterns. Look for the patterns, because sometimes you're going to have to explain these kinds of things to your students. You're going to have to develop some examples that will show the pattern to them. But in this particular case, I have a main verb of am, and it has not right after it. Then I got all kinds of auxiliaries and other helping verbs, but it's always after the first one. All right, that's my fun for the day. Now, what's common to all of the perfect tenses? I'm going to have to jump down here to a different point. Let's take a look at, where did I put it? There it is. Here are some things to think about. We have 4 aspects. The aspects are these things.
why
that
you
are written
typing
across
in
the top.
the game
You can
thing
still
when
see
you're
my,
in
you
class, boy?
can still see it, right? I've got, slide says summary. And I said, we've got 4 aspects. We've got something called the simple aspect. We have something called the perfect. We've got something called the progressive. And we have something called the perfect progressive. They all bring a slightly different meaning to the verbs that we are putting in this aspect. And we also have 3 tenses. Okay, I don't know where my camera is there. 3 tenses: present, past, and future. And what's happening is we combine those. And so what we have is what typically people call 12 tenses. It's really not true. We have 3 tenses: past, present, and future. But we've got these other things that we use to adjust those tenses. And when we do that, they are the aspects of simple, perfect, progressive, and perfect progressive. Now, I'm going to go back up here a little bit. And we're going to quiz our way through this. We talked about tense verbs. We talked about where not goes. And now we're going to say, I've got the perfect tenses. I've got the past perfect. I've got the present perfect. And I've also got the future perfect. And you should have read about this already. What is it? If I look at this, I have seen that book. I had been to Mexico before, and I will have eaten octopus by the time I return. I have seen, I had been, I will have eaten. Present, perfect, past, perfect, and future perfect. What is common to all three of these tenses? Two things that are in common there. They all have, Aisha, what have they got it? I see you nodding your head, so I know that you got it. No? I don't shake your head. What does every one of those words and verbs have?
Okay.
You got it. Okay, great. So every one of these has some form of have. I have seen. I had been. I will have eaten. What else do they have in common? Can you jump that far, Aisha?
I.
That's a true statement, so I guess I didn't ask my question correctly. What about the verb, though? They all do have I, but what about the verb? All of them have some form of the word have. What else do they?
Past participles.
The past participle. Very good. So when we look at a perfect tense, it's going to have the word have, as Aisha said, and it's going to have the past participle, as Rachel said. This is going to happen in every perfect tense. Okay? What is the tensed verb? What's the verb up here that has the tense? Kayla. Is it have or is it the past participle? Guess correctly. Who's going to guess? Kayla. Come on, guess. We'll only ridicule you if you get it wrong. We'll make fun of you and stuff. What do you think? Is it the past participle that has the tense, or is it have that has the tense?
Is it have?
You're exactly correct. Very good. The tensed verb is have. It's the auxiliary. I have been, present tense. I had been, past tense. And I will have been, future tense. All right, great. So now we got the perfect out of the way. What is common to all the progressive tenses? I am going home. I was returning from Chicago, and I will be going to grad school next year. What's common? Emma? Emma. What's common there? Two things.
Thinking about it.
What's what? No thinking required. There's two things in common.
The ing.
That's one of them. That's called the present participle. So every one of these has an ing form of the verb. And what else does it have? What verb does am, was, and will be belong to?
Beaver.
The be verb. Okay, good. Huh?
I was about to say, was it like a present tense? Like they go where
Well,
or not?
we could say something like he is going home now, so we could get the is, or we are going home now. But am and was and will be are all different forms of the be verb. The one that we use probably more than any other verb in English is the be verb. Is, am, are, was, and were. Comes in 6 different flavors, depending on where you're using it, and will be. Okay, so the common thing is they all have a form of be and they all have a present participle. And they all, interestingly, seem to be showing duration, something that feels like it's not a moment in time, it's something that's crossing moments in time. I am going. It does mean right this minute, but it also kind of indicates that it starts somewhere and it stops somewhere. I was returning, the same kind of a thing. And I will be going. All of these are kind of showing duration. So that's another thing that they have in common. And what's the tense verb? This should be easy.
So, Mr. John,
I'm sorry?
I have a question.
Okay.
You see, this is going, returning. Going is present participle.
Correct.
Is the present participle same as verb ing?
Yeah. The present participle is always formed by adding ing to the base verb. Sometimes you have to make a little change in spelling, but it's always, as you say it or hear it, it's always going to be ing on the main verb. What's the tense verb, Teresa?
The 10th one is returning.
No, sorry. What's the other possibility? Because remember, we said the present participle does not have a tense by itself. What verb here is actually changing? Am, was, will be. Present, past, yes, exactly. It's the be verb that's carrying the tense. Just like in the case of the perfect, we have the auxiliary carrying the tense. Because going, the going is not present at all. It's the present participle, not the present tense. Okay, here we got one more to go, like that, and it is like this. What is common? And listen, when I said what is common to all perfect tenses, and what is common to all progressive tenses, now I want to make this tough and say, what is common to all the perfect progressive tenses? Teresa, you want to take a shot at it? I have been going, I have been running, I will have been flying. Been is there, that's true. Great. And that been is the past participle of what verb?
Be.
Yeah. So they all have the past participle. That was part of the perfect. What else does every perfect tense have?
ing.
It's got have. Don't we have I have, I had, and I will have? Right? So far, all the perfect progressives have what perfects have, and a past participle. And then also, what else do they have? What does a progressive require?
I was thinking, sorry. I was just thinking, to myself.
That's okay. Thinking is
Like
fine.
verb plus ing.
They got an ing. That's true. So here so far we have I have and been. So I've got a have verb and a past participle. So that covers my perfect part. And then the progressive says we have to have two things. One is the present progressive, going, running, and flying. But what's the other thing that it has to have? What's that verb? Teresa, you have answered before?
Be.
Be. Is there a be verb in here?
Yeah.
Been. So look at this. All perfect tenses must contain have in the past participle. Have been, had been, and will have been. That covers that. And all progressive tenses require a be and present participle. Been going, been running, and been flying. How do we accomplish both? Well, she will have been driving. And so with the perfect progressive, we have to have all three of those parts in the correct order. So have and been and the present participle, and the tense verb is have. Now, I'm going to leave you with this table, and I want you to kind of go over it. You're going to need to be able to see this and do it in one of the homework assignments that's coming up. But as we look at this, we can say every perfect has have and a past participle. And the thing that is changing tense is the have auxiliary verb. And the progressive is kind of similar. It has to have to be, and it has to have a present participle. And it's the to be auxiliary that is the thing that's changing. And once we get to the perfect progressive, this has both. Now, I'm going to ask you to write, I'm going to actually make sure that this goes out there. It'll be out in the PowerPoint. But what I want you to realize is this is an extremely good website for looking at your verb, okay? If you go into www.englishpage.com, go to verb page and verb tense intro, it's going to come up with a screen like this. And when it comes up with this screen, look, it's got all of the different present, all of the simple tenses, the continuous or progressive tenses, the perfect, and the present perfect. I'm sorry, past perfect, continuous. One note, make a quick note, continuous and progressive are just two words used for the same thing. Continuous and progressive. So don't miss that. Nonetheless, if you go out here and you jump into one of these, this will take you to a site that explains what each one of these verbs is used for. And each one of them is used for multiple things. So you're probably, just like me, you're not going to be able to memorize every single use of all 12 of these verb, tense, and aspect explanations. But if you keep this site available, you can always go out there and look them up very simply. And it's a very quick screen. Present perfect probably has 7 different ways that it can be used, maybe more. All right, so you're going to see an exercise where you're going to have a whole bunch of sentences. You're going to have a verb there. You're going to have to go out there and tell me what verb tense it is. And you're also going to have to be marking the participles. All right. I've talked to you about this one once before. Tense and aspect combinations, we have 12 of them. And when we are teaching our students about them, we have to teach them how to make positive statements, how to make negative statements with those verbs, how we form questions with those verbs. And it's pretty important to make sure they start to understand about contractions. Because even though contractions are kind of informal, if they always walk around saying, I do not do this and I did not do that, they begin to sound like a textbook. Because we don't talk that way. We use don't, did, haven't, hasn't, and everything else. And then remember that only one of these carries 10. All right, there are 2 things left here. One is pay particular attention to these pages. I told you about these the last time we met. I've now written them down. It tells you all of the different tenses that are used to talk about the present, the past, or the future. And it gives you explanations, and it also shows you the form. This will be particularly important in one of the main questions on the exam. So make sure you know what is on these pages. And the other thing we're going to be doing is talking about a little bit more about verbs coming up soon, transitive and intransitive, And we'll expand on that concept next week. So let's stop sharing. This stuff is out there. I told you that we were also going to have a poll. Excruciating facts? Excruciating? No. These are all wonderful facts. All right. Here's the question for you. I'm going to do a poll question. Okay? The answers are anonymous, so I won't know who says what. But so far, you have tried several weeks of once-a-week classes, right? We've had about 3 of those, and we had 3 weeks where we came 2 days a week. Now, the big question is, how do you want to go forward? Do you want to continue with once a week until week 14? Or would you like to change over so that we're meeting 2 times a week? You have now tried this. Do you want to go back to twice a week? Did everybody really say they want to go back to twice a week? No, okay. I don't know why it first popped up as 100% wanted to go twice a week. Is everybody done answering? Okay, so it looks as though we've only got about 1/3 of the people who want to do it twice a week. So I can't very well change it now, but I would invite those people who want to go twice a week to schedule time or show up in my office hours. And if my office hours don't work, we can set up a different time. But since 2 out of 3 people don't want to meet twice a week, I can't very well change it. But I can meet the needs of those people who want to be here twice a week. So if you're one of the people who wants to be here twice a week, why don't you send me a quick email and we'll figure out a way to accomplish that without penalizing anybody else. Okay? So you send me an email if you want to meet twice a week. And if you don't have to let me know at all. All right, that's where we're at. So I'm going to stop. I'm 2 minutes ahead of time. Yay me. And I'm going to sit here and wait until everybody's gone. I will answer your questions if you have them. And if you don't, you're free to go and I'll see you next week. And again, if you're a twice a week person, let me know. So we'll figure something out. You all right? Are we good? All right. We'll see you later.
I had one question about the second project. I didn't look at the instructions or anything yet. But so far, is it like similar to the project 1? Like, are we still coming up with 5 exercises and then it's just on verbs, like just
Correct. That's exactly what it is. It's going to be the same as the first part of the portfolio, but this time you're going to be looking at verbs. And you can do all kinds of different things with those verbs. You could talk about verb tenses, or you could talk about how to use modals. How to negate verbs is another good one. How to form questions, because the verbs tend to change a little bit when you do that. But to answer your question as simple as I can.
Sorry, click and what he was